Then I'll do all my announcements.
Okay, so holy orders. It's an interior called by God. It's not a right or a career choice. It should not be viewed as a higher position, but as a call to serve is kind of what we talked about. The outward sign we talked about. Outward sign instituted by God to give grace. The outward sign of holy orders is the laying on of hands. In the cases of priests, the bishop also anoints their hands with the sacred chrism. Did you guys talk about the three holy oils, Richard?
A little bit, you can tell.
A little bit. Okay, so we'll do it real quickly. So there are three holy oils. Those of you who will be baptized will get an anointing with the sacred chrism. All of you, I'm assuming, will be confirmed. You will all get anointing with the sacred chrism. So one other time the sacred chrism is used is during holy orders. And I like to share this story because I share with all the baptisms. So when a priest is ordained, his hands become sacred because it's his hands that he uses to confect the Holy Eucharist, right? So they take the sacred chrism and they put it on his hands. The bishop will put it all over his hands, and then you've seen that white cloth that we use on the altar called a purificator. The brand new baby priest will walk off with a purificator draped over his hands, and as he leaves, you see him take that purificator and he'll rub all that sacred chrism off of his hands. The next part's what's really cool. So immediately after they've rubbed all that chrism off of their hands that they can, they take that purificator and they present it to their mother as a present. Mothers keep that for their entire lives, and they say that most moms are buried with that from their son's ordination. It's just a cool thing that I like to share. So there are three levels of holy orders: bishops, priests, and deacons. Great question would be, what about the Pope? Is that a different ordination? It is not. The Pope is basically, it is a different office, and there's a huge ceremony, but the Pope is basically the Bishop of Rome. So we're going to talk briefly about the three different levels. First is the bishops, which are the episcopate. They are the successors, they are direct descendants of the 12 apostles. I don't know if you guys have talked about that, but their lineage, Archbishop Naumann's lineage, can be traced back to the 12 apostles. And I just think that's such a cool thing. It's an unbroken chain called apostolic succession, and it's only found in the Roman Catholic Church. A bishop can confer all 7 sacraments, including holy orders. When a bishop is ordained, he's given a gold ring, a tall pointed hat called a mitre, and a pastoral staff which looks like a shepherd's hook. And it's a symbol of his new role as the shepherd and the pastor. Each bishop is assigned to a specific geographic region and the parishes within his region. And he's responsible for all areas of stuff in the diocese. If you guys ever get a chance to look at the Levin, look what the bishop does on a regular basis. And that man is crowded 75 years of age. There is not a chance in the world I can keep up with that guy. So what I would tell you guys is pray for our Archbishop and pray for who's going to replace him, because they got great big shoes to fill, both physically and literally and spiritually. Next we talk about priests. In the Old Testament, priests like Melchizedek were messengers of the Lord, appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. It was a foreshadowing of what was to come with Jesus, the one true high priest who offered his body and blood for the Father once for all for the sins of the world. Jesus extended his awesome power to those of the priesthood called to this role. They're chosen from those who intend to remain celibate for the sake of the kingdom. Their celibacy is a sign of their intention to imitate Christ's own celibacy. And I love this next thing, and to serve with an undivided heart. Priests don't have to have a heart divided between what I do. What if I were a married priest and I have a son that's got to go to the hospital, and I now have a parishioner who's dying? That would be a divided heart. What do you do there? One of the just quick reasons, good reasons for celibacy. There are some rare cases where clergy are married. There is one in Kansas City, Missouri. What that would be someone who was a married clergy in another denomination who converted to Catholicism and asked to become a priest. So it does happen, but it's really not the greatest of ideas. Even that priest that's over there would tell you Yeah, it's not the greatest of things because it's hard to have an undivided heart when you have a family to raise. A priest like a bishop is no longer an ordinary man. He's a man who's been made in persona Christi, which means the person of Christ, through the laying on of hands like we talked about from the archbishop. His primary role or function, his roles are to offer Mass, administer the sacrament of reconciliation, anoint the sick, baptize and marry. Those first three that we talked about, offer Mass, sacrament of reconciliation, and anointing of the sick. All three things that a deacon cannot do. We do not have those powers. They also baptize and marry. He also has administrative responsibilities to the parish he's been assigned to. Yeah, our pastor's kind of like our bishop. He's a busy man. Unlike the bishop, he cannot ordain, but he can confirm if his bishop grants him that power, which is going to happen for you guys all on Holy Saturday. But in order to do that, he has to petition the archbishop for the power to do that. The last and the greatest of all is the order of deacon. I'm kidding about the greatest of all. It's the least of them all. The term comes from the Greek diakonia, which means servant. Deacons are ordained by the bishop, not to the priesthood, but to the ministry of service. Through ordination, the laying on of hands, the deacon is conformed to Christ the servant. Christ, who came to serve and not to be served. As I told you guys, I was in the last group of men that was ordained as deacons for our archdiocese in June of 2020. So I'm coming up on about 4 years here before long. There are two types of deacons. There are permanent deacons, which is what I am, and transitionals. Transitional deacons are guys that are on the way to the priesthood. The year before they become priests, they become transitional deacons. And so when a priest preaches the gospel, he does it in the order of a deacon, because all of our priests are in fact deacons. Permanent deacons are most often married men, as in my case, although not always. Most all of us have full-time jobs to support ourselves because we're not paid by the church. I wrote here, we're approximately 15 hours a week of service to the church. Yeah, it's a lot more than that for a lot of deacons, guys. Deacons assist at Mass, preach, teach, witness. We can bless marriages. We can preside at funerals. I've baptized 67 kiddos, I think, since I became a deacon. And our big thing is works of charity. If we're married and our spouse precedes us in death, then we become celibate. It's one and done. I can never be remarried, because so that once our spouse has passed, we also can serve the church with an undivided heart. Because we are ministers of the word, when we're ordained, we are presented with a book of the Gospels. And the bishop says this to us: receive the book of the Gospels, whose herald you have become. Believe what you read, teach what you believe, and practice what you teach. Yeah, it's cool. Interesting to note, so the first deacons actually, we find them in the Acts of the Apostles right after, not shortly, which is the first book after Christ had died, right? So deacons came on the scene really early on, faded out in around the 500, but it was actually at the Second Vatican Council, which wound up, I think it closed in like 72, that the diaconate was revived because the church just needed help with the priests. Guys, that's all I've got for you. I hope it was beneficial. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and bore you to tears. If you have any questions, yeah, I'd be happy to take. Yes, Mike.
Mark, so if Gail was to predecease you, can you then become a priest?
You know, you could petition Archbishop and see